Hello and welcome to the IndieSider podcast where I play indie games and then interview the developer. I'm your host Ken Gagne and this week I'm playing Perchang for iOS from the studio Perchang. It's their first game and it's named after the studio. It's a two-person group. I'll be speaking with Mr. Ben Murch and Pete Akehurst later in this show. But in the meantime, let me show you this iOS game coming soon to Android. The cost is $2 and I received a review copy from the developers, full disclosure. So it is a puzzle game that has been likened to Marble Madness, Lemmings, and possibly even Lunar Lander. Here's the very first level. Now this Rube Goldberg-esque machine, I can only control this one piece in the middle, this red lever. And by pushing the red button, I can make the red lever turn. And thus I'm able to make sure that the marbles make it from the spout to their goal. That level was pretty darn easy. But other levels introduce other mechanics. This one, for example, has a blue platform, and then when I push the blue button, it goes up, and when I let go, it goes down. And again, I just hold the button down, and all the marbles will make it to the goal. These first two levels require no skill whatsoever beyond just holding down a button. But the game does get remarkably more complex. Let me skip ahead a little bit to another level. I'm going to go, this is the first area, which has 5 levels. Each area has 5 levels. I've made it to level 26 or so. Let me give you a preview of level 11, then I'm going to go back and do them in order. Love that dolphin. Okay, so this one has a little bit more timing required. I can't just hold down the button. I actually have to push it at the right time to flip the marble into the goal. And once you get the timing down, it's pretty easy. Just keep doing it, just keep swimming, and pretty soon you have enough marbles in there, as indicated by the rising meter right near the goal. You can see that each marble that goes in, another white line fills up. Now that was easy, but that's because it was the first level in the area. The last level in each area is the hardest, so let me go ahead and do level 15. And you'll see this one, has 2 levers. And if you tap one, you can change its color. So there, now that one is red, and now I can operate them independently of each other. But this requires that I keep my eye on 2 different things at the same time, because I need to be moving the marbles at different points. But you can see that this would not work if they were the same color, because whenever I push the red button, both red levers would operate simultaneously, and that just won't do. Now you can get gold, silver, or bronze medals based on how quickly you finish the level. So you are on the clock. You can see that in the upper right corner there. Right now I'm vying for a silver, and I still have 3 marbles to go. I've missed at least 3 so far. You can see them collecting down there at the bottom. So this is definitely a physics-based puzzle game, and I've never been very good at physics. But that little slowdown right there indicates that you are about to get the last marble in, which is fantastic. So that is the essence of Perchang, a physics-based puzzle game. I'm going to go ahead and start over at level 3 or so while I speak with the developers. Again, that's Mr. Ben Murch and Pete Akehurst of Perchang. If you want to listen to just the audio version of this show, you can find that at IndieSider.net/Perchang. You can also leave a review on iTunes or leave a comment on the YouTube video that you're currently watching. My thanks to Twitter user NMRJess for suggesting the question with which I open the interview. Here it is. Today I'm speaking with the co-founders of Perchang, one being Mr. Ben Murch, the creative director. Hello, Ben.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yes, very, very good, thanks. Thanks for having us on the show.
My pleasure, and joining you is Mr. Pete Akehurst, the technical director at Perchang. Hello, Pete.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir. Thank you for giving me your time. You're calling from, what is it, London?
Well, no, we're in Guildford, which is just outside London. It's where they call it the UK gaming hub, really, where all the games get made. But I'm not so sure that's true anymore now that Lionhead's closed down.
Oh dear. Well, other than Perchang and Lionhead, what else do you have in your neighborhood?
God, let's see. We've got EA and, well, Criterion, I suppose. Three Fields Entertainment. There's, of course, Supermassive, who did, what was that called?
Until Dawn.
Until Dawn, that's it. Yeah, they did that last year.
Fireproof. You do the room.
Yeah. Lots and lots of smaller indie studios around here, because it seems to be that thing where you get a great big company like EA, and then a lot of people kind of splinter off. I mean, we used to have Codemasters here, which is actually where Pete and I first met. And then when that studio closed down, you saw, maybe 10 or 15 indie studios pop up as a result.
Sure, we had something very similar happen here in Boston when Irrational Games closed.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what, actually? I nearly came to Boston to work at Irrational.
Ah, well, you'd be out of a job then.
Yeah, lucky I didn't, yeah. It was actually visa problems, I think, in the end, or something like that. I don't know. Anyway.
Now you're there, and now you're working on Perchang, and I'd love to speak to you about it. I've been playing this game on iOS ever since it just came out about a week ago, and the puzzles, some of them I can get right off the bat. They make me feel super smart, and other ones make me feel not so smart because they're super challenging. And so I have to ask, how did you model the puzzles for this game? Were you playing with actual physical pieces and say, hey, this would make a good puzzle, or were you using a 3D modeling program? What was your inspiration for the individual designs?
God, that's an interesting question. Okay, so the whole concept kind of came from an amalgamation of ideas that Pete and I both had, really, and we sort of formed it into the general sort of feeling of Perchang, which is you have these gizmos and they change color and you have to get balls into holes. And then after that, we just kind of, you're walking along the street and you see something and you think, oh, that could be part of a level, you see some bollards or something and a football kind of knocking between them. You think, yeah, okay, I could make that into something. You sort of get inspiration for them all over the place, really. And then, and once we kind of rough it out as a 3D model on the computer. I mean, using Unity is really great for just prototyping, all that kind of stuff. Then, yeah, we just sort of play around with it and make sure it feels all right and get the gameplay up to a certain standard that we're happy with before even touching any of the art side of it, really.
These Rube Goldberg machines that you've created are really quite elegant. They're beautiful to look at and also very, very challenging, as I mentioned.
Ah, thanks. Thank you.
I've seen the game described both in official documentation and in reviews as being inspired by such titles as Lemmings, Lunar Lander, Marble Madness. Are these the games you two grew up with?
Certainly, Lemmings, I think, for me was a massive kind of influence on the game. I'm not so sure about Lunar Lander as much. Marble Madness, I mean, for obvious reasons, but Lemmings for me was one of my favourite games growing up. I think the complexity of the levels just kind of had me hooked for weeks or months. I think it was so yeah, absolutely. Lemmings was a huge influence.
Yeah, I'd go with Lemmings over the other ones as well. I mean, yeah, as Pete says, Marble Madness is one of those things it's easy to draw a kind of comparison to our game with. But Lemmings was actually it was the first game that I had to update my dad's PC for. It was Lemmings 2, I think. It needed 8 megabytes of RAM or something like this. Something ridiculous. So yeah, just that sort of feeling of having all these things drop into the world and then having to get them somewhere via mechanics was really kind of the driving force of the game. Yeah.
I think the differentiation between the levels as well, the idea that each level was quite a unique experience, I think it was something we worked on quite a lot. Or something that came actually quite organically out of the original idea, actually. The fact that each level was kind of an individual thing, an individual experience that you had to figure out as you were playing through the game.
Yeah, the way the game introduces you to the individual mechanics at the beginning of each area is really elegant because the first level is so easy, it's almost not a puzzle, but then it introduces you to the elements that become much more complicated as you progress through the area. I almost look forward to finishing each area just so I can get a little breather and start with something easy again.
Yeah, that's actually by design, really. It's one of those things when you're thinking about the audience that you're playing to, you have to start really easy and really spell things out for people because it is a mobile game. So you're going to get all sorts of people who don't, traditionally play games, right the way through to people who are completely hardcore PC players and this kind of stuff. Starting off at that simple, what is it? The first area is just literally sliding things, isn't it? And rotating things. Yeah. And so it's just kind of getting that idea of pressing buttons to change things in the world. And then slowly adding these elements in, you get this nice spiking of difficulties. So you have sort of your 5 levels, and then the boss level. 5 levels in a boss level? I should know this, shouldn't I? Really? No, it's four levels.
No, it is 5 levels on the boss level. Yeah,
5 levels including the boss level.
4 levels at boss level and a gold run level. That's it.
Sorry, it's been a long 6 months. Yeah, so you get the gradual sort of ramp up of difficulty, and then that accumulates with the boss level, and then it sort of, you want the player to have a bit of a breather. So you push them back down again, and you say, and here's a new element to play around with. Here's a fan, or here's a cannon, whatever it is. And then you slowly ramp that up again. Because if you just sort of had, just a constant hill that you're running up, then I think people wouldn't be playing it for as long, because there wouldn't be that nice rhythm to the yes, this is tough. Oh, this is okay. Thank God for that.
And one of the interesting things, I think, from our point of view, is it very much came out of us trying to make the development process easier. We started with 5 or 6 quite disparate levels, I guess, with different elements playing in different ways and having different clever things in those different levels. And when we kind of sat down after a month or so of development and kind of looked at what we had and where we were going, the idea of introducing a different element in each area as it is in the game just kind of like naturally fell out of looking at what we had, and it made it easier for us to plan how we would make the game and what levels we were going to add, but also it naturally fitted into the idea of having kind of almost like a natural tutorial which played through the entire game.
Yeah, there's a big old spreadsheet somewhere online, which is all the levels listed, and then where we were going to bring certain items into the levels and the areas really, and what we were going to teach the players along the way. Because there's you bring in something like a fan, and the first thing you do is you kind of go, okay, you press the red button, and that makes the fan work, and you just hold it down and you do a level, and you've learnt fans. Well done, that's great. But then there's other things you can do with fans. So you can, feather the ball and things like that. So you need to kind of take that into account and make that the focus of a level before adding in any other kind of elements as well. And the amount of times we switched things around in that spreadsheet, it was a good month, I think, of just let's bring this in here instead. Let's bring that in there instead. So there was a lot of kind of forward planning with all those kind of elements and gizmos before we even started doing the artwork in earnest, really.
How long would you say development was from concept to publication?
That was 6 months, right?
Almost exactly 6 months.
Almost exactly, yeah. We started just, I think it was January the 2nd. Took January the 1st off.
Well, I think we initially talked about the game in probably November time, maybe December time, just chatted about the idea of making a game. But actual development, once we just kind of decided that maybe we were going to make a game together, because it's the first time we have done that, actual development did start, like you say, January
the 2nd,
5th, 6th of January.
Yeah.
But I was on holiday then, so I think maybe a week later.
I got a few days on you.
And this is Perchang's first game, right?
It is, yeah. It's Perchang's first game. I mean, it's so I've known Pete for, crikey, maybe 10 years. Is it really that long? It's a while.
Almost.
Yeah.
I think 8 years, but
8 years,
not far
okay, yeah. And like I say, we met at Codemasters, and we always kind of wanted to work together on various things. But I've been at Rodeo, and then Pete was at Popcorn and some other places and things. And suddenly the stars aligned just before Christmas, and we realised we both had a bit of free time, about 6 months.
Yeah.
And so we said, hey, why don't we just work up a game concept together and make this thing, make it. It'd be great. And it turned out to be okay.
Yeah.
We haven't killed each other.
It went surprisingly smoothly. It really did.
And you were able to work on this game while continuing to be affiliated with Rodeo and with Popcorn?
Yeah, well, I can only speak for myself, really, because so Rodeo Games is taking a bit of a breather at the moment. There's just all these things that happen when you have a company of your own, that people want to try out different ideas or do different things. So that's kind of on hold at the moment. So that's all fine. And with Popcorn.
Yeah, I mean, Popcorn was it's I suppose a bit of an experiment really for me and some friends of mine in terms of making indie games. It started out as 4 people and ended up mainly being just me, as it turned out. So in terms of problems with the affiliation, it was kind of me allowing me to do something else really. because it was such a small company. So no real issue there, to be fair.
I guess it's a lot easier when you're just working for your own company, really. Because if it was EA, can we have a little bit of time off to make this? They might frown on that a little bit. But when it's your own sort of thing, you can kind of make up the rules as you go along, really.
Certainly smooths out the decision-making process.
Yeah.
Perchang, though, is very different from what you've worked on before at those studios, like Storm Rush at Popcorn and Warhammer Quest at Rodeo. What would you say is sort of the common themes or DNA that people can see in Perchang based on where you've come from and what you've worked on before?
So the Warhammer Quest stuff is so basically the problem with all of those turn-based strategy games, and this is always something which irked me a little bit over my career, and most of the games I've worked on actually, because I was on Burnout and various other kind of violent-y kind of gun games and this kind of stuff, is that I'd take it home to see my folks and things like this, and they'd say, "Oh, this is lovely, looks really great." And I'd give the iPad to my mum, and she'd sort of press a few things and go, "Oh, yeah, I see, yeah, okay, great." But it was never really a game that everyone could get behind. And, my brother's just started having children of his own and stuff, and I thought it'd be nice to, make something that just appealed to everybody, really. Something which wasn't all guns and violence, which you see so much of these days, which is getting a tiny bit tiresome. And something which kind of explored a more creative, puzzle-solving kind of thing. And it's... I guess if you're not careful, you can kind of get a bit pigeonholed in the games industry, where you're that company that does turn-based strategies, or you're that company that does puzzle games or whatever. So for me, at least, it was about sort of trying out something else and kind of expanding the audience. Something that relatives can play and understand.
Yeah, it's very interesting for me, actually, taking it back to my family. I think maybe my previous games have been a bit more accessible than Ben's in that regard. But certainly there was quite a big difference with Perchang relative to the previous games I've made, in terms of the fact that, I remember one particular visit home where I was back at home for my grandmother's birthday, and within an hour or two, both my grandmother and my 5-year-old nephew had, so my grandmother's 85 and my nephew is just 5. In fact, both of them had played through like 5, 6, 7 levels of the game, and seemed genuinely to enjoy the experience of playing the game. I mean, certainly the 5-year-old it did, because, well, he would have said if he hadn't, to be perfectly honest. But my grandmother as well, whereas previous games maybe she'd not necessarily understood, or maybe kind of said she liked it but kind of didn't get what was going on. With this game, she seemed to there's something in it that seems to appeal to a broad range of people, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's an 80-year gap right there.
Exactly.
That's quite a broad market, really. Having more people to appeal to, and to give a little bit of entertainment. Because that's kind of what we do, really. So we're just glorified entertainers, really. We just make things that people kind of enjoy and spend a bit of time on. So the wider the market and the more people you can bring into it, the better, really.
I think one thing that's nice for me, actually, now I think about it again, is just the ability to work with Ben, really, in terms of working with a 3D artist, which I've actually not done before on games I've made before. Even though I've made 3D games previously, they've been extremely simple in terms of the 3D elements that have been involved in those games, simply because it was me making them, and my abilities in that area are relatively limited. So working with someone who had the ability to imagine these kind of 3D environments in the way they are in Perchang was kind of like a massively interesting experience, and hopefully a good experience in terms of the success of the game.
And the game has the same name as the studio, Perchang. How did that come about?
So we get asked this a lot, actually. It's Perchang is a made-up word that we made up many years ago. That we just used to say to each other, and then we'd high-five because we were idiot 20-year-olds. And it was kind of, it just meant like it was like a little bit of a boost, like a hey, that's an awesome thing, or hey, we're about to do something great. It was actually probably before I'd go off and give a presentation or something like this. or we'd go to a bar or something. Yeah. And so when we were talking about company names, obviously we both just thought Perchang was a good fit for that. And then the game itself, we went through about maybe 100 names. So many. And I think the front runner was Small Balls, which is a terrible name, really.
Oh dear.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't have done half as well. And then we were talking to a friend of ours, and he just went, "Oh, I thought the game was called Perchang." And then that just we just went, "Oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense."
I read a review on Touch Arcade that implied that the community there had some feedback during the development process. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we announced the game on Touch Arcade originally. I think maybe 8 weeks ago.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So quite a decent chunk of time before we actually released the game. And after the announcement, we got a little bit of coverage on on Touch Arcade. But also, we had a bit of contact from some of the guys on the forums. One in particular, a guy called Roger, who's been absolutely fantastic during the last couple of months in terms of testing the game. So we've had a number of people that we met through that process that have been testing the game, and again, the feedback has been pretty astounding in terms of the difficulty levels of the game, the curve of difficulty throughout the entire game, and also just in terms of pointing out various kind of like bugs and issues and that kind of thing that we hadn't necessarily noticed through the amount of testing that you can do just as two people, really.
Yeah, I mean the whole Touch Arcade forum crowd, they're really, really, really into their games, which is what you really, really, really want when it comes to people to test and things like that. I mean, the budget for this game was so minimal for both of us that we didn't really have any money to do proper Pete's making the zero with his hand, that we didn't actually have any money to spend on actual professional testing, which is something I've done in the past with some of our other games, and which is a costly process. So all our beta testers came from the Touch Arcade forums and from people who'd been to our website and maybe seen the trailer and thought, that would be a fun thing to do. And really, those people are absolutely amazing. They write you, pages and pages of feedback, and they get bugs that you'd never even have thought of trying for. One kind of instance sticks out, really. It was the gold run in the flipper zone, which I think is area 3. And it was from Roger, and he'd been... So that level originally had 3 balls, and the third one was almost impossible to get. I mean, I think I'd done it once, perhaps. And it was about the third day of Roger emailing us saying, I really can't do this, that I eventually sort of conceded and went, all right, fine, we'll change it. But yeah, that was quite a sort of... a learning experience of, because you're so close to it and you're making it yourself, you kind of know how to do all the puzzles and you can figure things out, and you're pretty good at the game because you know all the ins and outs. Whereas having actual regular people, off the street, so to speak, really sort of brings it down to earth, and it sort of goes, oh, actually we need to curb the difficulty here and there.
It especially helps with the puzzle element of the game as well, because while the skill kind of... because Perchang is it's kind of part puzzle and part skill, I suppose. The skill element is kind of one of those things that we both have kind of different proficiencies, I suppose, in terms of playing our own game. But we have an understanding of how hard it is to, I don't know, when you're using a flipper, flip the ball into a certain area with a certain accuracy. With a puzzle element of Perchang, whereby if you change the colours of the elements, it will maybe make it easier or less easy to complete a level, or it might even be impossible to complete a level if you don't change the colours. Those kind of things, when you're the person who's laid out the level or designed the level, those things always seem pretty obvious to you, because you're the person that's made them. Whereas if you're, just somebody else, anybody else, doesn't matter, but someone with a fresh perspective, they can look at it and go, well, I don't really understand this, and you realise through that process that actually maybe what you thought was obvious really, really isn't. And a lot of those kind of things were pointed out by the testers we had, and it was, as Ben says, absolutely invaluable.
And ideally, you'll have more people playing the game when the Android version comes out, which is later this summer. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're working on that right now, literally today.
Just started
that today. So, but because we're using Unity, which is a fantastic engine, the process should be relatively easy. I mean, there are a few kind of iOS specific elements in the game that we'll have to change over to Android, and of course, running through all the billions of different phone sizes and things like that. That takes a little bit of time, but we're really hoping end of July, beginning of August, that kind of time frame for it.
Were you aiming for a simultaneous launch on the two mobile platforms?
No, frankly.
It's one of those things. It's probably an ideal situation to be able to launch on two platforms at the same time, and with a technology like Unity, which allows you to make a game for multiple platforms simultaneously, it's achievable to a degree, but frankly, the amount of time we've spent doing things maybe other than making the game in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks makes it almost impossible to do a simultaneous release when it's only two of you, really. There's only so many hours in the day, so we decided relatively early on that we'd definitely plan to stagger the releases and see how things went in that regard.
It's one of those things as well. It's kind of better the devil you know. I mean, I've launched this is my 5th, I think, game on iOS, which I think is quite impressive, right?
Quite impressive, yeah.
And so I kind of, we've got a few contacts at Apple who you can at least send the game to. Whether they get back to you or not is a different thing. But you sort of know how it's going to go on the App Store a little bit. And I've not really launched that many games on Android, so it's when you're sort of doing your first game at a new company and you want to make more games as that company, then you sort of want to cut down as much risk as possible. So doing this, in what is quite a risky game anyway, because we had literally no idea if people were going to like what we'd made. We knew at least there was a good, healthy audience on iOS.
My grandma liked it.
Your grandma likes it. Yeah. Doesn't own an iPhone.
Well, that is true.
So yeah, I mean, cutting down the risk and things. I mean, maybe next time we'll go Android first. I mean, it's actually something we were talking about today. Yeah, just to see how the Android market is these days, because a lot of developers report that it's actually a lot better than it used to be. It used to be around about 10 or 20% of iOS, revenue-wise, we're talking. Whereas now people say it's actually kind of comparable, which without actually, without having a similar game to test on Android, without having it on iOS, is hard to know. But it's definitely something we're interested in. It's definitely something we want to do next time. But yeah, it's this time around it was just about risk, really.
And I read that the game is even coming to other platforms. Can you give us any hints what those might be?
Yeah, well, we're going to go PS4 and... Pete's face just drained white. Well, we can say this, right?
Absolutely, I think so. Well, we spoke about Android. Obviously, we're going to go. We're going to look at building an Android version, and we're also going to look at tvOS as well, and potentially Android TV as well. I think.
Yeah,
as a similar kind of platform. There's a few kind of niggles to work out in terms of how it might work on a TV platform. The basic skill element of the game is kind of like easy to transfer. Press the red button, the red thing moves. Press the blue button, the blue thing moves. But there's the idea of changing the colours of the elements is maybe something that won't work obviously on a non-touchscreen device. So we've got a few ideas in terms of how we might solve that issue, but we haven't come to an absolute conclusion yet, but we're certainly looking into it, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I've played the game on my Apple TV at home.
Have you?
Well, I mean, using AirPlay.
Oh, right, okay.
So it looks nice on a big screen TV. So that's good. That's a good first step. But yeah, it'd be really exciting to do the Apple TV, because that's something that neither of us have ever launched a game on. And yeah, I just quite like to do it just as a bit of an experiment and a bit of a hey, look at that. Perchang's on Apple TV.
I do quite like the idea of seeing it on a TV.
Yeah,
it would be awesome.
It's quite cool.
Yes, I'd love to play the game on tvOS. I was also wondering if it would be a good fit for the Wii U, or if that console is now a lame duck.
Wow. I mean, how much time do we have? I think maybe more NX, really, than Wii U, depending what the NX is. Yeah, I don't think I'd launch anything on Wii U at the moment. It's really tricky to get stuff on it, number one. And number two, there's not really much of an audience, I don't think.
Well, we're quite a small developer, and I must admit I've worked on Nintendo platforms very what's the word? I haven't worked on Nintendo platforms a lot, basically during my career. Maybe I've spent 3 or 4 months, I think, working on Nintendo platforms. So I'm not hugely a huge expert in that area, but I think for us as a pair, as a very, very small company, and to try and get a game on Nintendo, it sounds like it might be maybe a bit of a difficulty.
Sounds a bit tricky, yeah, and maybe not worth the effort. I mean, something that I've been looking into, I'm not entirely sure how keen Pete is on this, but is augmented reality stuff. Ooh. I think it's quite an interesting market, more interesting than VR at the moment, because VR kind of cuts you off, whereas AR really adds to your world. And there's a small company, pretty big company called Cast AR.
Jerry Ellsworth, she's the founder,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I've been looking to their stuff, and they seem really good and really legitimate, and actually might make a huge dent in the AR market when their stuff comes out. So yeah, it's on my to-do list is to email them and ask about dev kits and things. And I think seeing Perchang on an actual table in front of you would be a heck of a thing. That would be really enjoyable, right?
It does sound quite like it might be quite impressive actually to see. Yeah. Even if it's just us.
Even if
No, that would be a lot of fun. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Perchang came out, you worked on it for 6 months because you saw you had some availability in your schedule to create this partnership. What is next for this company, or are you now both headed back to Rodeo and Popcorn?
Ooh, that's something we actually can't say, isn't it? We do have something lined up that we have started working on. Ben started working on it. Pete, maybe not so much.
I've considered it.
You considered it, yeah. Yeah, it's this is quite tricky to talk around because we're not really allowed to talk about it. It's quite different, and maybe it uses a license, maybe it doesn't. It's a very, very different type of game. That's sort of the idea I talked about earlier about not really being pigeonholed into any one kind of area or genre is definitely quite important for me, because it just helps, bring something a bit new and a bit fresh to the stuff that you're doing. Having made turn-based strategy games for the last 5 years, you really start to sort of see fatigue there and stop bringing new sort of things to the genre. So having a bit of a break is really kind of opens your eyes up to newer and sort of and better things. So yeah, we can't really talk about what it is next. We're definitely doing something together, maybe with a couple of other people as well. But what that is, we can't say just yet. I think
it's certainly very early stage. There's no doubt about it. And we were actually talking today about the fact that in the last week or two we haven't really done very much in terms of working on either Perchang or working on anything else. We've kind of been, I suppose, in a bit of a limbo, which is it's naturally what happens when you get to the end of any project, whether that's with your own company or whether you're working on something larger or something else. There's always a lull when you finish, because there's a certain euphoria that comes with actually completing something that you've been working for a long time on. Although, obviously, in this case, it wasn't actually that long, but still, there is that element of having finished it and the taking time out to enjoy that fact, and then reflecting on what maybe we might do in the next 6 months,
you sort
years.
You take a little bit of time out and then hit back into it. I mean, you can't just sort of work. Because when we talk about doing development stuff, it's not easy. It's like a good 10 hours a day on an easy day. So when you kind of get to the point where the game's out there and people are enjoying it, well, hopefully, you never know. And you naturally just kind of take a little step back and you get a little perspective, and you sort of do some other things in your life, and then and then when you're ready, you head back into it again and you hit it full force.
It's almost like a metaphor for Perchang. You finished one area, it's going to be easy now, and then it's going to get harder.
All right, I'm definitely using that.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to whatever collaboration you have next, because the first one was a success, in my opinion. Can you remind our listeners where to find it?
Yeah, well, it's Perchang, and you can find it on the App Store. You can find us on Twitter at We Are Perchang.
Perchang are us.
Perchang are us we went for, didn't we? Yeah, sorry. You can find us on Twitter at Perchang are us. You can find us on Facebook at
Is it Perchang or Perchang Games? I can't remember.
I think it's Perchang Games, because Perchang is actually a guy called Perry Chang.
That is true.
Yeah, he got that one, didn't he?
And on Twitter.
Yeah. And of course, you can always email us at info@perchang.com. And you can find us in Guildford most days as well.
Great. If anybody wants to come knocking, that's where they are.
Don't come knocking. Don't come to our houses or anything. That'd be weird.
Wonderful. Well, Ben and Pete, thank you so much for your time.
All right, cool. Thanks very much, Ken.
Thanks a lot, Ken.